Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 12th. It is 9:30, and it is the time for the regular agenda of the Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Good morning. Let the record reflect that Commissioners Decker, Goldsmith, Villa are present, and we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. On our agenda today, we have several matters, several donations. I am going to, at the moment, bypass or start with number B, 1B. We're going to skip A for a moment. And items 1A and E will be heard together. And Commissioner Goldsmith will lead that portion of the meeting as I will be recusing myself. So let's move on to item 1B. Are there questions from commissioners? Seeing none, are there public comment cards on 1B?
We have one, Mr. Herman.
Mr. Herman. Mr. Herman.
Madam Decker, good morning. Do we have a quorum? Apparently we do. I want to thank you in recognition of 18 U.S.C. 245 in participation in the enjoyment and the benefit of service, privilege, programs, and facility of this activity, along with 42 U.S.C. 1983, which is my free speech, regarding the $60,000 dispute on October 15th FedEx memo that I believe it's Miss nowadays, all this transgender shit gets me confused, but.
Sir, you're not on topic, sir. 1B.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Strike that, let's go back on the record. Regarding the 39,420 Gs for license B851640. Again, for the record, license B. Regarding Graham Construction. Well, I don't know what the hell the acronym RAM stands for, but I can give you my version. Retards acquiring motion.
Mr. Herman,
However,
please stay on topic, sir. The definition of these terms are within the materials provided.
I've read the material back there regarding Amy Farkash, Farksh, located at 6412 WST. I can't read my writing. Something IDOR Avenue. However, this Reseda resident or business has allocated. Benefits for the Wilshire area as set forth. Thank you, ma'am. See, I'm on topic.
Thank you. Approve the department's report and accept the donation? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? It passes 4-0. Yes, I had asked that this be corrected on the agenda, and regrettably it wasn't. Let me revise that. The motion needs to be to approve the department's report and transmit to the mayor and city council for acceptance. Is there a motion to that effect? A second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? 0. And the error was due to the fact it's over the amount that this commission can accept on its own. Moving on then to item 1C regarding a donation from the Police Foundation for Harbor Area. Are there questions from commissioners? Seeing none, are there public comment cards on item 1C?
We have three, Mr. Novick, Mr. Herman, and Jonathan Foster.
Mr. Novick, sir. Mr. Novick, Mr. Herman, and then Mr. Foster.
Yeah, this is a donation of over $16,000 for a holiday party from the Los Angeles Police Foundation. I think it's improper to accept grants from the Los Angeles Police Foundation. I think it's unconscionable to be spending $16,000 on a party. And I think that you should reject this money and have the Police Foundation spend it on community needs like education, housing, jobs. We've talked time and time again about the conflict of interest involving Mr. Soboroff and the LAPF and the LAPC. And I don't think you have anything in particular to celebrate. I'm not sure which holiday you're talking about, but I think that you waste far too much money on the police department already in the regular budget, and that you should not accept additional funds on top of that. So I urge you to reject this proposal.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Foster, if you're ready, why don't you proceed? Mr. Herman, why don't you stand in queue, please? Mr. Foster?
My general question is there alcohol at that holiday party? Is there alcohol at the holiday party?
It's a bomb.
Well, it's not really funny to me. I know somebody's probably going to go party at another party, but is this one got alcohol in it? I don't think you should be having a party with alcohol, but there was also a pullover where an officer put cocaine on a black suspect pullover. We never found out where they got the cocaine. Is the cocaine going to show up at the holiday party? The officer had the cocaine, though. Where did it come from?
Sir, this is about a
Did it come from the
donation,
narcotics?
sir.
We're going to have a party. Party means drug use, miss. A celebration is non-drug use. Party is a drug use, miss. I smoke pot, so I could be convicted. You could just beat me down, miss, but I'm talking about real things. People got hurt. A black guy was going to get pulled over, put in jail for cocaine. Where did the coke come from? You're having a party.
Sir, if you want to address the donation, you're free to.
It shouldn't be donated. Should not be done. Shouldn't accept. If there's alcohol, if there's no alcohol, no cocaine there, have a celebration, not a party. God bless.
Thank you. Mr. Herman, sir.
Oh, for the record, 1E. I truly take no credit for the truth that I am not an alcoholic, and I prefer that at these events, due to cadets and young adults participating in these holiday events, that you provide enough outside security. And for that reason, because of the questionable misappropriations of this holiday expenditure of $16,000 brings to light my complaint. So it's apparent that I'm in opposition. Matter of fact, I'm here under my Title VI complaint form, Civil Rights Act of 1964, for the record, because I find it offensive that many of us who participate in all these meetings daily, like Mr. Corey, we should have a right to vent and make our opinion known to reflect the record. That as of this holiday party, as set forth, now no one gives a hell about the mayor because he has his own private parties, like the time he had the party for the Kings.
Sir,
His
this is about
fucking
a
greatest
donation
event ever. That's what I'm
the
quoting.
LAPD.
I'm quoting, ma'am. I'm quoting. So in addition to the department's report on item C, which is BPC 19-0306, I'm in objection until we get a report as to the consumption, the drug use, and the misappropriations of a potential problem here because of that one officer who danced naked lately in the news. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Is there a motion to approve the department's report and transmit to the mayor and city council for acceptance? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That passes. At this point, why don't I step out and ask Commissioner Goldsmith to handle items 1A and 1E, both donations. I'll step out because I teach at both USC and Pepperdine, and to avoid the appearance of impropriety, I'll let her handle those matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1A, can we have the department come up and just share a brief update?
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Lieutenant Brent McGuire with the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy.
Morning.
Captain Brian Liam from Legal Affairs, acting for Commander Burt at Legal Affairs Risk Management Group.
Thank you.
Okay. So this donation request is to fund a conflict resolution course that the department partners with Pepperdine Law School's Strauss Institute. The money is going to pay for 2 classes, which will be able to facilitate 80 to 90 students. This conflict resolution course teaches such things as active listening, interest, identification, intent versus impact, reframing, and verbal de-escalation, which is a little bit different than what we talk about verbal de-escalation with use of force. This is de-escalating conflict between employees. We've been running this course with the help of Pepperdine since 2015. We've been able to get over 500 students and 140 command staff through the course. In post surveys of the class, 90% of our students have reported back within 6 months they've already been actively using the techniques that they've learned in the class. This class is an integral part of our risk management and harm reduction strategy. One of the areas that we identified where we have a lot of lawsuits stem from workplace lawsuits. So it's hard to find direct correlations between the class and the lawsuits, but since we've been running this class, we found that our workplace grievances have dropped 28%, workplace complaints dropped 40%, our workplace claims for damages are down 56%, and our workplace payouts from last year to 2018 have dropped 71%. So we find great value in offering this course just for the risk management reduction alone. However, we've also found when we talk about procedural justice, one of the key things with showing procedural justice to the community is that we need to show it internally as well, that the stronger our internal procedural justice is, the stronger our external is. So we believe this class is necessary to strengthen our internal procedural justice within the department. It also gives officers skills for resolving conflicts when they're on radio calls, whether it's domestic or landlord or business disputes. It gives them the skills necessary to resolve those conflicts. And then one side benefit is respondents have also said that they've been using it at home with their families. And obviously officer suicide has been in the news lately, so one of the stressors, especially officers, is family conflicts. So any way we can work to reduce that is a benefit to our officers as well. I know when we accept donations, especially one this large, the inevitable question is are we requesting this in the budget? And the answer to that is yes. We've asked for a budget item on this the last 2 years. We've also requested for an additional 11 classes on the upcoming budget. We're hopeful that that will get passed this time. We haven't been able to get it approved in the budget the last 2 times, but because of the great benefits that we've been getting, we hope to get it approved on this budget, and we think it's a good investment of money just because it's $60,000 on the front end, but lawsuits and potential claims for damages could be in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. So we are asking that you approve this so we can continue this great program.
Thank you. Remarkable success. Do you have anything to add, sir?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I didn't see in the report, so forgive me if it's in here, but can you give just a general sense of, you gave an example a minute ago of how some have found this helpful in resolving family disputes and things, things of that nature. Can you give a little sense of the kinds of disputes that are addressed relative to the workplace? Number one is just a general sense of, are they people who have, these are 2 people, coworkers who have disputes, right? So give a little sense of what those disputes entail. And are they both on the sworn and civilian side, or what does that part of the picture look like?
Yes, so it can be both sworn and civilian, and for the classes we have sworn and civilian supervisors going through the class. A lot of our lawsuits stem from unhealthy work environments, so that can just be two people that work together day in and day out, just like normal human interactions. They just are not getting along for whatever reason, whether it's simple things like stinky food that they're eating at lunch, or different ideas on how to accomplish a task. So obviously in policing, we encourage some sort of healthy conflict, because that leads to innovation and creativity. But when that conflict starts to degrade and impact the workplace and make it an unhealthy environment, that's where we're trying to get it, where it starts small before it escalates into something bigger and then turns into a lawsuit.
And thank you. Can you put in a little bit of perspective in terms of this is now relative to the uptake? How many, how the level of utilization of the process? Is it very well utilized? And just put in perspective that issue. Generally, how many go to the dispute resolution, and then also how many does this grant cover? Like, is this grant the entire, or donation the entire dispute resolution program, or is this one other brick in the basket, so to speak?
So number one, it's something that we would like to get approved in the budget, so we can do 11 classes next year. However, this grant is kind of a stopgap, and will fund 2 classes, which would be about 80 to 90 students, both sworn and civilian supervisors. And as far as how much it's utilized, like I said, we do post class surveys that are about 6 months after the class. And 90% have said they've used it at least one time during the workplace. Another, like around 60%, would say they've used it 2 to 3 times over the last 6 months. And then about 30% are saying they've used it like 7 to 8 times throughout
But
those 6
do we know
months.
then, in terms of putting that in perspective, do we know how the utilization looks in connection with the bigger picture? So is it still this other vast sea of untrained and unresolved disputes, or do we have some sense as to, again, how impactful the program is?
Again, it's kind of a preemptive measure, so I can't predict exactly how many lawsuits or claims we've headed off, and it's hard to draw exact correlation, but as I stated earlier, we have seen a significant drop in the number of grievances and lawsuits since we instituted the class, which gives us some sense that we believe that it is successful and something that we should continue to pursue. I don't know if that's answering your direct question, or
Yeah, it
if
is.
I can
It
answer
is.
it any better. It's an imperfect system that we have in place, because I can't state future lawsuits that we headed off before, because that's the purpose of it, is to get it to where it starts small and we head it off before it grows.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I think one thought would be, when we get to the next conversation about risk management, maybe we will find some way also to capture some of this conversation to help just provide a little more perspective.
Yes, no problem, sir. We do those reports that come before the commission, so we'll definitely include that in there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 3 cards: Michael Novick, Mr. Herman, and Jonathan Foster. Oh, I'm sorry, 4, and Gina Viola.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're concerned about risk management and conflict resolution inside the police department. You need to look more at risk management and conflict resolution in dealing with the public. But in terms of this grant itself and its purposes, I think it's important to point out that both the question of police suicide that the officer mentioned and the question of domestic violence, which he didn't say, but that's what often happens in family disputes involving law enforcement, that the stressors involved in law enforcement that produce that have less to do with police workplace conflicts and more to do with the colonial role that police are forced to play as an occupying army in communities. People who come in with one idea about protect and serve discover the reality is completely different, and it screws them up. I think that it's also important to consider whether this idea of reducing conflict and disputes inside the police department has to do with actually maintaining the blue wall of silence that covers over police misconduct and trying to keep officers in line as opposed to having them disrupted in their allegiance to the LAPD over and above their allegiance to the people of the city. So I'm very concerned about this grant. I think you should reject it. Again, it's, as you acknowledge, it's above the level that you usually accept. And it's, again, from the LA Police Foundation. And I would question, again, the connection with Pepperdine, given the role of Pepperdine in fronting for you on other projects. In particular, what the officer said demonstrates a fundamental error in studies of all kinds, which is that there's no correlation is not causation. So you can't claim that they're reducing lawsuits because of this program.
Thank you, Mr. Novick. Mr. Herman?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mr. Novak's opinion and point of view regarding the legal notice and the warning from the public. Yeah, you know, it's apparent that 18 U.S.C. 242 and 18 U.S.C. 245 has been an issue regarding the risk management. And that's because, again, the law provides that it is a crime to violate the rights of a citizen under the color of law. And it's apparent that the dispute resolution, like a TRO or threat management unit that uses enforcement under SLAPP, is always an issue targeted by individuals in our local government. Because it's apparent that they love to abuse constitutional laws and make up stories. Oh, I'm afraid. Oh, I'm scared. But again, 42 U.S.C. 1983 for the record, I'm not a pussy. None of us in here are pussies because we're here to work and advocate to regulate the issues of dispute on the training. For that reason, Ms. Decker, for all I know, is receiving free monies from USC for her family. That's been the issue in the news with USC. USC is, you pay to get a degree.
Madam Vice President, the speaker's off topic.
No, I'm on topic because the topic is about the Los Angeles Police Foundation teaching at a school risk management when the policy and provisions are poor. And the action of this advice of training valued at $60,000. Where is the transparency oversight in this? A pattern and practice of corruption, abuse, and fucking waste.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Mr. Foster?
Hi, Jonathan Foster. I guess all resolution, dispute resolution training is good. But I've noticed that it didn't happen with Illuminati Beck. It didn't happen with Chief Bratton. The New York City Police Departments often themselves, Israeli soldiers have the highest suicide rate. But, I wondered, does any human have it in themselves to try to de-escalate? I watched something with the LAPD shot a guy with a knife. He was coming right at the guy, so it was a little bit hard to do they tried to, de-escalate, but the guy picks up the knife off the ground and charges the officers. He lost his life, so this is very tough. But I wondered, don't 13,000 people know within themselves how to dispute resolute? Do they need to be taught? Really, do we need to be taught? Wonderful people. I mean, trying hard. I mean, trying to support. It's very tough hearing about what happened with the Native Americans, that nobody wants to give their land back and give this operating the land. It's theirs. They've been here for 12,000 years. But today, this operates as the United States of America. It has a protocol and an operation, and we have people that want to get up and put a badge on with a gun, and they're taking their life out there, risking their lives. It's absolutely commendable. We're humans, still human beings. So I had wondered, don't 13,000 people know within themselves how to dispute resolute? It should not be taught. Were you not taught from your mother and father? If you do have one, I'm sorry. My last name's Foster, so I get the idea about foster care. I'm sorry it happened to you. So that's what I ask. We wouldn't need to spend a penny if Israel wasn't getting trillions of dollars through the Pentagon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Gina Viola?
Morning. So it just troubles me that these donations so clearly set up a conflict of interest for members of the board. And how can you possibly accept those when your own president has to recuse themselves for a conflict of interest for a donation? And I see that being the case over and over again. You have another member on this board that has to recuse herself when Predpol comes before us. And donations related to that. Also, the irony of dispute resolution needing work and training within the very entity that is sole purpose is dispute resolution, isn't it? Isn't that what the police are doing, protecting and serving, solving disputes? So I just urge you to reject this donation and any other that creates any conflict of interest for any member of the board, let alone your president.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from the commission?
Madam Vice President, I'm sorry, we have one late card. Did you want to accept
Okay,
that?
sure.
Adam Smith?
Adam Smith?
Good morning. Who said that? Oh, right on. No one else? So, I'm sure that the commission is aware of this Sacramento Bee database that was released yesterday. And I'm wondering, Chief Moore, I guess, specifically, if you all take dispute resolution and the internal workings of your officers and how they're acting on and off duty, I'm wondering why some of these people still have jobs. There's a guy that was Richard Garcia, felony. He was charged with felony assault by a public officer when he kicked a black man during a traffic stop in South LA in 2014. Beck kept him on, obviously. He wasn't convicted of felony assault. It was kicked down to a misdemeanor, but he was still convicted of assault, and he's still out there patrolling these streets. So I'm wondering what dispute resolution looks like for Richard Garcia and the black man that he beat almost to death. And there's a whole bunch more on that list from yesterday that, including 2 that have shootings and they have convictions. So just wondering.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Can I hear a motion to approve the department's report and transmit to the mayor and city council for acceptance? I did say thank you, Mr. Smith.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, item 1E. Any commissioner questions or comments about that item? Public comment on 1E?
Yes, we have 4. Michael Novick, Jonathan Foster, Mr. Herman, and Corey Schmidt.
Mr. Novick?
And 1E, we haven't gotten to D yet. Yeah, 1E is a department report relative to donation for the approval of a clergy breakfast for close to $10,000. I think that you could improve your relations with the clergy if you allowed some of them to speak at these meetings, like Reggie Bunch, who you shut down and shut out repeatedly. I think you could improve your relations with the clergy if you listen to some of the clergy from Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice and the Black Jewish Justice Alliance and a host of other clergy organizations and organizations of people of faith who are trying to get the LAPD to stop killing people in this city. So if you're, serious about, I'm not sure really about, personally I believe in the separation of church and state, and I don't think it's appropriate for the LAPD to be hosting a clergy breakfast. But if you are professing to be God-fearing people, then the fear of God should be in you about what you do on a daily basis to harm the people of this city. So rather than holding a breakfast to talk about that, I think you should just get out into the community and listen to the clergy who come here and the clergy who don't necessarily come here but have repeatedly said that what you're doing is violating the moral and ethical responsibilities that you have as public servants, and that you should take the sanctity of human life much more seriously than you do.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Novick. Mr. Foster.
Hi, Jonathan Foster. You're going to have a clergy in. And I don't know the first three names over there, but I want to know, do you support clergy sodomizing boys? Next one, do you support clergy sodomizing boys? Next one, Vila, do you support clergy sodomizing boys? What's the name over there? Yeah. I wish he was already dead. Soberov, do you support clergy sodomizing boys? Whatever your name is, do you support clergy sodomizing boys?
Madam Vice President, speaker's off topic. This is
It's
about a
not off
donation.
topic. You're having clergy over there. We know they've been sodomizing boys for 1900 years. And you're going to have a party with them at a Galen Center. Is that Jewish? I don't approve. I can imagine that thing is still built, like standing. I guess you support sodomizing boys.
Madam Vice President, the speaker's off topic,
You
second
must
time.
then support that, because you're
Foster,
gonna.
please stay on topic.
You know what this looks like with the LAPD getting together with this? The real Christian church doesn't do this. It does have its problems, but it's not a worldwide organization. It doesn't just happen in LA. It's happened in South America, Central America, North America, Russia, all over Europe, South Africa, Australia. Are we ready to stop this? And it starts here where we
Madam
don't.
Vice President,
You don't
still
get
off
together
topic.
with no. You don't get together with clergy. That's the reason, and you won't let me state the reason. Is your brain on, or did you leave it somewhere else?
Madam
sir?
Vice
You're a
President,
jerk.
speaker's off topic again.
Okay,
You're a
Mr. Foster.
jerk.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
No, does the chief support sodomizing boys? Chief Michael Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
I got no or yes. I got nothing.
Mr. Herman.
Well, we certainly cannot deprive or have this deprivation of grown clergymen fucking young kids. It's a fact. Now, if you disagree with me, then the statement in this LA Times article here, the reflection of the Católicos, and I'll read it in my language. Los reflexiones de los católicos putos. And this was dated, ¿Por qué sigo siendo católicos? Dentro de la iglesia muchos permanecen felices. Ay, mendigo. Ay, mendigo. So, Mr. Foster and anyone speaking on this topic is on topic, according to my questionable point of view. Because for decades, these clergy breakfasts have become a cesspool of fucking young men and women,
Madam Vice President, speaker's
in
off
which
topic.
includes a venue for this breakfast at $150 per cost. Generous speaking, $9,000, $250,000 when the fucking Catholic Church is the richest fucking
Madam Vice
institute in the
President,
world.
speaker's off topic.
So from the University of Southern California, like we said earlier, 8 individuals died by suicide. How do we not know that the suicide
Madam Vice
could have been
President, speaker's off
prevented
topic
had
again.
you not been fucking people at USC, questionable clergy, because you asked them to forgive? Now the benefit of the Los Angeles Police Department has set forth, I'll put it very clear. Stop fucking cadets.
Okay, Corey Schmidt.
Okay, Corey Schmidt for the record. Try to tone it down a little bit. Sounds kind of gnarly out here. So one big thing for me personally is separation of church and state. It's in our Constitution preamble, somewhere in there, from the founding fathers, because there was a big stranglehold on, well, not only democracy, but on the people itself from the church back in the Middle Ages. So that's the reason why there is that. It's a big thing to keep them separate, because if you have them together, they, it's a superpower. So I am very much against keeping them together, so I'm not sure that I'm for this. What I do think, though, I like the idea of breakfast. Maybe we should spend this money on having breakfast here so that we have a nicer evening, or a nicer morning, you know what I mean, rather than having all this craziness. It might calm people down. So just saying, might be cool to have it here.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions on this item? All right, can I hear a motion to approve the department's report and accept the donation?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It carries. All right, while the commission president is coming in, we can hear item D.
Yes. For a moment. Good morning. If you could introduce yourselves and then give a brief review of the matter before the commission.
Yes, good morning. Jeffrey Phillips, Commanding Officer of Audit Division.
Mike Rakunas, Assistant Director of Operations.
Sergio Sais, Audit Division.
Commissioners, before we use the arrest booking charging audit, Audit Division has been conducting audits of arrest procedures since the consent decree. In fact, this was one of the mandated consent decree audits. There are some significant changes in this particular audit report of arrest reports that differ from previous audits, essentially looking at body-worn video and looking at the automated field data reports. Audit Division reviewed a statistically valid stratified sample of 72 arrest reports. There were 4 overarching audit objectives with 10 tests that were completed. Now, objective number 1 looked at the articulation within the 4 corners of that arrest report with regard to legal action. So reasonable suspicion, probable cause, and the legality of search and seizure. The department did well for that objective. Objective number 2 looked at the consistency of information. So now this essentially is looking and comparing what was written in the reports with the body-worn videos as well as the AFDR information. And with regard to consistency between what was seen on the videos and the respective arrest report narratives, the department did well. As it pertains to AFDRs, however, and notwithstanding the fact that still the compliance rate was above 90%, we were unable to find AFDRs for 6 corresponding arrest reports. For objective number 3, we looked at the activation of the body-worn cameras and the digital in-car video system. Both objectives came in above 95%. And lastly, objective number 4 looked at the supervisory oversight of arrest reports. So we looked at the approval of the arrest reports and the booking approvals. And again, the department did well. We have no recommendations in this audit report, and that concludes my summary.
Very well. If the others wanted to present anything before we go to questions, you're welcome to.
Sure, ma'am. So in response to Audit Division's report, the 6 that were identified, we did a review of those, and 4 of the 6 were domestic violence related incidents. And prior to May of 2018, Department of Justice did not mandate that domestic violence related incidents.
I'm sorry, Commander. Which item are you referencing? Which objective? I'm sorry.
So it's going to be 2B.
Thank you.
So 2B, so there were 6 identified where Audit Division could not locate the AFDRs, but 4 of the 6 were domestic violence. And so this is going to go back to a training issue. Prior to May of 2018, Department of Justice did not require AFDRs to be completed for domestic violence related incidents. And 2 of the incidents were failures. They just weren't completed. So our Office of Operations has launched an extensive training in regards to AFDR completion. We're looking forward to The launch of Premier CAD, the new MDC that launched October 22nd, allows us to send pop-ups and reminders to officers in the field about AFDR completion. So we're working with ITG to have that placed in the computer system so officers can be constantly reminded of AFDR completion, because it does go back to training and continuous training as reminders. We're also working with the city attorney at the city attorney disclosure in regards to arrest and booking, of modifying the city attorney disclosure form to have a checkbox for AFDR completion, as again, a reminder as officers are completing their city attorney disclosure. The AFDR box shall be checked with a number, so we're working with the city attorney on that. And then finally, in relates to the arrest reports, on the arrest report, there's a list of connecting reports, and for us to specifically spell out AFDR completion with numbers as, again, a third reminder for officers in the field to complete them properly. As mentioned, the Bureau, we do have Bureau inspection teams that conduct audits every DP, and so we're rebuilding, and then, as you know, along with the new body worn and AFDR audit that we're going to start in December, that's another level of review that's going to take place in this process.
Sir, and just to follow up with you, Commander, since you brought it up, because I did have some questions on that. Currently, the AFDR report is automated, correct?
Correct.
And what you're suggesting is that there will be the new procedures you're implementing and new forms will just have an opportunity to ensure that that is not overlooked, that it is done automatically, and that there are many checks and balances. Is that what you're effectively saying?
Correct. To place constant reminders to our folks in the field, along with continual with supervisory review of AFDRs, that is standard today, along with Bureau inspection teams doing audits for completeness and accuracy. So that would be a couple additional layers of review. And again, this is training, constant training at the Bureau, at the area level, to ensure that our folks are completing as required the AFDRs.
Okay. And so when the audit found that they could not find, that really means that it wasn't done, right?
Correct.
Because it's automated, so it would be there if it had been done. And so 4 of the 6 were due to domestic violence, the underlying issue being related to domestic violence. The other 2, sir, do you know what they were?
They just weren't completed.
Just not completed, okay.
And again, not taken away, they should have been completed because that was May of 2018, prior to May. But in our review, in our audit of the work that was conducted, domestic violence wasn't a requirement, and that was something that needed to be reinforced at all our bureaus for completion.
Understood. Thank you. I did have a question on the timing of the audit as compared to the new state requirement of capturing the RIPA data. And I may have the timing off, but the audit was completed, or the data extracted for purposes of the audit was between July 1st, 2018 and the end of 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And when did the new state-mandated RIPA data collection program become implemented in the department?
July 1st, 2018.
Correct.
So the audit was conducted as the department was transitioning to this?
That is correct, and we recognize that. We just thought it was a good way to measure where the department was. We are, as we speak, concluding an audit on AFDR exclusively, looking at, and that this is now post that requirement being implemented.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure I understood that the audit was happening as the department was actually transitioning. And,
that's correct.
And so this gives the department effectively a baseline for moving forward on how it did during the transition period, and then how it will presumably even do better in the future.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the idea. Okay. I did have a question, and I hope you don't go too much into the statistics on this, but I'm just curious how 72 is a statistically significant number out of 14,000.
Okay.
It's
counterintuitive.
It is, and I
completely
don't understand it. And admittedly, I'm not a mathematician.
Nor am I, ma'am.
Didn't
but
study
I will,
statistics, but I'd like to understand how that is possible, because
Sure.
it doesn't seem accurate to me.
So essentially, it has to do with the law of probability. And when you have a population that is performing in the same fashion, you will essentially get pretty much the same results. But the other big part here is that what we are testing is what is referred to as it's binary. It's yes or no, meaning that our test questions was probable cause there articulated in the report, yes or no? Was reasonable suspicion articulated, yes or no? Was there an AFDR, yes or no? That allows us to take a one-tail test, which the sample size is much less than a two-tail test. The two-tail test is used for more comprehensive statistical analysis, and that's where you are trying to obtain whether there is a correlation or causation. And you're doing regression analysis type deeper analyses. So this is a very straightforward, you would not see us trying to explain any type of causation or correlation in any of our audits because of that reason.
And is this an accepted procedure in I don't know if it's called the science of conducting audits, or is this standard operating procedure?
This is an accepted.
Excuse me, please don't shout out.
This is an accepted and a standard sampling procedure in the auditing field. It would beg the question in an academic study, because again, academic studies, they're doing a much deeper analysis of whatever topic areas they're researching.
And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to understand. So if you're just trying to find out compliance, non-compliance, this methodology is acceptable? Is that what you're suggesting? But not like the why they're not complying?
Correct.
Not be. That would be a more detailed?
Correct. That would be a much deeper analysis. And I'm going to go off the top of my head. If we were to conduct a two-tail test in order to do a deeper analysis and trying to find causation and or correlation, we'd probably be looking at ballpark figure, maybe about 400 or 500. The sample would be about 400 or 500 arrest reports that we would have to look at. But now again, that's a much different project there than what we're presenting here.
What you're suggesting is that there's different levels of detail that could be conducted to evaluate this issue.
Oh, yes.
And this is effectively the preliminary of whether compliance, non-compliance.
Yes.
Okay.
I always, I get the opportunity to speak to other agencies, and I always describe it as audits are the little cousin of a full-blown research study. It's not as statistically detailed as a research study. It's to, again, in our case, to give us a good idea as to where we are with complying with our own policy and procedures and or the law.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can add just
yes.
one last piece, that this process was also approved by the independent monitor and the U.S. Department of Justice very early on in the consent decree. And it was because they conferred with a statistician, and again, because of what it is that we're looking at, very binary, yes or no, it's an acceptable practice.
Okay. With respect to this would be an operation question, sir. In your response, you describe in an upcoming inspection that you're planning to do. I wonder if you can describe what that will entail and what you hope to gain from that.
So in the upcoming inspection, well, first let me start. So we have our bureau inspection teams that are looking at AFDRs for did they do it or did they not do it. So what we're looking at, and starting in December, is looking at body-worn video, looking at the AFDR that was completed from that contact, and looking for a correlation to make sure that officers had reasonable suspicion, they had probable cause. But we're having a field supervisor examine the video and the AFDR to ensure that it was completed properly, it was completed it was evaluated for, I'll use procedural justice, that we treated people with respect and dignity, and we allowed a voice to be heard. And then additionally, the activations to ensure that folks are actually turning on their body worn and things. And then there's a tactical side, ensuring that our folks are tactically handling situations properly. So we're going to provide training in 2 weeks, and then go into, we're going to run about a 6-month pilot, I would say, with our GEDs and metros to examine, evaluate, and then hopefully after 6 months launch it department-wide. And then with our supervisors being sent things, our videos for review, et cetera.
Very good. Commissioners, did you have questions? Questions?
Thank you very much. Going back to the question of the statistical sample, I appreciate what you explained in terms of technically speaking why that may be a statistically relevant population. But number one, I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit of the footnote that comments on that. In particular, this is at the bottom of page 2, that says the statistically valid sample can be projected to the population, but may differ within the respective objectives due to variances in applicable sampled items.
Yes. So if you look at table number 1, notwithstanding the fact that our sample was 72, there was a couple of particular sub-objectives. Objective, and I'll draw your attention to objective number 1C and 1D, wherein for those, looking at those arrest reports, the applicability of a search and or a seizure was limited to, for example, in objective 1C, 46. In other words, all 72 did not have a search that was conducted, or for objective 1D, a seizure that occurred. So there was only 46 that were applicable for that particular objective, and there was only 43 that were applicable for that particular objective. So that skews the being able to project it to the entire population, because now the population was reduced. Now, if you ask the question of, well, why don't you then go out and look for some to replace those and bring it back to 72, it's kind of what I call looking for a needle in a haystack. We would have to go through many reports and read through them to try to identify, was there a search in this one? No. Okay, next. Was there a search in this one? No. Next. So that would be extremely cumbersome in trying to replace those particular arrest reports.
Okay, so and on the basic point in terms of the decision to look at 72, even if one accepts that that's a statistically relevant sample, is there anything that limits you to that? Like, could you have decided 72 is a statistically relevant sample, but we're going to look at 100 or 150 or 200? Could you have made that determination?
You can make that determination, but again, we go back from a statistical sample. The results, let's just say we draw a line and say, well, we're going to go ahead and bump it up to 100. From a statistical standpoint, the results of looking at 100 would essentially be the same as a result of looking at 72. In fact, the results would be essentially the same. Now, again, and trying not to get too deep into this statistical conversation, but there is an error rate. So what that means is that if we were to do this test 100 times, that means we use a 5% error rate. That means that the results would be, or can be, within 5% of what we have here. So when you look at the objectives and you look at those results, there can be a 5% variation. And that would be the case whether we do a one-tail test or a two-tail test. You have that error rate that is part of sampling. That's one of the risks, if you will, of sampling. Nonetheless, it gives us a good idea of where we are with regard to testing these particular objectives.
Okay, thank you. I would say that the concern that I have, and it's not necessarily within the four corners of this audit report, but I have asked a number of times, and forgive me if someone has already provided. We had a conversation last week about the audit, seeing the 2019 audit plan, right? And I think what I would prefer in some cases is One is you can maybe comment now as to, again, to give us the refreshers of how that plan comes about. I think once before it was explained that it's a plan that we also at some point review and decide on. But broadly speaking, I think what I'm looking for is a better way that the commission can understand on the front end what series of what issues we've determined to have audited, and then in some cases, like in this case, we might have made a determination that, yeah, we think you should look at more than 72 or a broader sample, or I'm just saying this by way of example, but I'm pointing out that I'd rather have an opportunity to, in some cases, to have some influence on, or more influence on what you're auditing, and in some cases, maybe how you're doing it. So speak a little bit as to how that audit plan comes together, and what opportunity the commission has to influence it, other than when the question is called in the context of reviewing and accepting an audit report.
So the Board of Police Commissioners has the opportunity, when we develop the department risk assessment, we call it's a department risk assessment, and we call it for the annual audit plan, although we go 2 years out. So, for example, currently we're looking at 2019 and 2020. When we were developing and conducting the department risk assessment, there was an opportunity for the Board of Police Commission to have input as to what the commission's concerns are, what audits they would think that maybe we should be looking at. And if I recall correctly, I did meet with Mr. Tfank in regard to that. The invitation went for the Board of Police Commissioners, and any commissioner to participate, but the meeting was with Mr. Tfank. My understanding is that he did speak to the commissioners, and he went ahead and relayed
that would have been roughly when. I'm not trying to pinpoint to that particular conversation. I'm trying to get my mind again around big picture, the cycle. Like, how do we get a little bit out in front of it so that we have a better grasp of what you're going to be doing?
That occurs maybe about anywhere between 6 and 4 months prior to the new annual audit plan coming out. That's when we're deep into the department risk assessment, and that it also entails looking at previous audit findings, looking at changes or new policies and procedures, and having interviews with some command staff, such as from Legal Affairs Division, from Professional Standards Bureau, from Risk Management Division, and certainly from the Inspector General as well, and certainly the Board of Police Commissioners. So we do this prior to and with ample time before developing the actual annual audit plan. In fact, if you look at the annual audit plan, there's a column that states the last time the audit was conducted, or it'll say new. And by and large, most of the audits are new. Because it came from ideas and concerns from all those stakeholders, if you will.
So with regard to the 2020 audit plan, where is that procedurally? Is there one that's coming together as we speak, or?
So it's the annual audit plan already shows the audits for 2020. However, I'd say as early as next month, there will be an amended 2020 audit plan, because naturally there's some audits that were not conducted or switched from 2019 to 2020 for various reasons, because maybe recommendations were still in progress and really didn't make sense to look at something until the recommendations are implemented, or there were some priorities with regard to a new audit that wasn't on the annual audit plan to go ahead and complete that. And so there's, off the top of my head, maybe some variation of anywhere between 3 and 5 audits that were switched. So the updated 2020 annual audit plan will be coming before you, I would foresee, within the next 30 days.
Okay, I would just make a request either to the chair or to Mr. Tfank or to someone that we put on the agenda an update on where that is, so that we can also see then what's in process and what's planned.
If I could amend that slightly, if I could ask you to have a conversation with Commissioner Bonner, who's responsible for strategic planning on part of the commissioners, before presenting the amended plan, and engage him in the planning for the next annual audit plan. I think that would be very helpful and important.
In fact, if I can offer this, I could go ahead and communicate with Mr. Tiefenk, and once we have those changes with of the 2020 audit plan, we go ahead and communicate with Mr. Tiefenk. I'll go ahead and forward to him, and either he can go ahead and forward it to you, or we can go ahead and meet and talk about it.
Sure, let's give it a try.
Okay.
And commissioners, for the record, Commissioner Bonner, your question was when the 2019-2020 audit schedule was done. I have a document here. It's signed by me on the 12th of December in 2018, and signed by then Commission President Soboroff on 12/11 of 2018. So that's the cycling. What we're talking about here is it does look to have a rolling schedule. It is meant to be 2 years out. It is a living document, and certainly is meant to reach the consensus of this board that these are the activities of this division, in concert with the ability of the board to use the Office of the Inspector General for a similar series.
Understood, Chief. Thank you very much, and thank you for your comment. I know we've had this conversation a number of times about what topics will be presented and audited throughout the department, and I just ask you keep Mr. Bonner, who's working on developing more of a strategic plan for the commission, informed of the changes, and engage him in the ongoing planning for the next annual audit plan.
Certainly. I did want to just mention, one of the things you mentioned, Commissioner Bonner, was the commission having more input on, say, how many items in the sample size we look at. And the only thing I would offer to that is the implications of that. If, as an example, if there's a desire to, say, look at 100, that means 28 more arrest reports, which means 28 more, at least, body-worn video. And whether the results of that are going to have any significant change, as opposed to how much longer it would take us to do that. And if we were then to start doing that for all our audits, or well, I'll say for all our audits, the implications being that we probably will have to reduce the amount of audits that we are able to get done within a given year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be get that concerned about it, because when I'm making the broad point of that, it's preferred that we have some opportunity to have that conversation before the report comes to us for approval. That's what I'm suggesting, so that you can either tell us why that's an advisable thing, what the potential concerns may be. Maybe you won't get anything else out of it, or what have you. But it's just better to have that. It's just better to have that conversation before we're calling for a vote to approve an audit. So that's all I'm suggesting. And as I mentioned, that I have made a couple of requests, including the conversation we had last week. I think you were going to send to me the 2019 audit plan, I believe, right?
Okay, so I will send that to you.
Yeah, so go ahead and send that to me,
Got it.
and then we'll follow up as Commissioner Decker has suggested.
Very well.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Other commissioner questions? Any other issue? Let me then turn to public comment. Are there public comment cards on item 1D, please?
We have seven. The
Seven.
first few are Jonathan Foster, Mr. Herman, and Zach Sherwin.
Mr. Foster, Mr. Herman, if you could queue up, and then Mr. Sherman following. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster on reasonable suspicion. Does not work with Eric Rivera. And because of what happened with Walter DeLeon, they just shot these people. There was no report of a crime, no crime had been assessed, no crime scene had been assessed, and no identification had been made. What happened when there is reasonable suspicion, but the officer does not react? Oh, yeah, excuse me. When there is reasonable I messed this up again. What happened when there is reasonable suspicion, but the officer does not react? Then a person commits crime, maybe an assault. A person commits this crime and the public gets angry because the police don't react, that the LAPD didn't do its job. And so this is all very tough gray areas in human activity. But doesn't every dad and mom watch their children with reasonable suspicion to protect their kids? That their kid may do something parents are watching out for. But the problem is the LAPD can kill on a mistake. And there has been so many smart minds that have never acted to change these interactions to always protect the officer. So the public screams the police tactical gear is military, so it's put on the police to kill, when many of other possibilities were and are available, and no one acted, which is why I think you're burning in hell. They could have done this, I don't know, 45 years ago. They could have been, I mean, these discussions just don't seem to happen enough. And with enough people screaming and yelling and screaming, finally, some changes are being made. And I thank you for those changes and efforts in changing.
Mr. Herman? Mr. Herman?
Mommy, now that Mommy wants to know the facts about the methodology of risk management, those risk bookings should remain on an audit 24 hours, 24 days a week, 7 minutes, and the accuracy of 360 days. Because Mr. Dale said, accuracy, yes, we pinpoint. No, you don't, you foolish shit. Because the audit straightforward shows that the racial profiling of arrests targets minorities, such as yourselves, a bunch of racial profiling minorities. But see, Mr. Bonner has to stay on the gang side of things about the department's report. See, I, for the record, am not an Uncle Tom, so I get to reflect my opinion based on the BPC 19-0307 for the record. See, there was no board action. Look at Sandra. She doesn't say anything anymore. Why is she on this commission?
You're not addressing the audit. If you could address the audit, that's before the commission.
Well, yes, I am, because I talked about the straightforward audit, or vice versa, audit straightforward based on the methodology of your management, which is a risk. So you see, let me give you the scenario this way. Parents don't want to lose their children in a booking arrest simply because an officer finds the person's disability disruptive and he beats the fuck out of him. Like they did in the Baltimore police investigation, where the United States versus the Baltimore police for fucking with
Sir,
people,
you need to
42
address this
USC
particular
12101
audit that's before
ETSEQ.
us.
After Mr. Sherwin, we have Michael Novick and Corey Schmidt.
Thank you. Mr. Sherwin.
The background section of this report begins with the language to maintain a society that is safe from criminal activity. And I just want to say that the implications of that goal are deeply troubling, considering that the department disproportionately criminalizes the activities of Black and brown people. So I wanted to lodge that from the beginning. The report goes on to assert that the department performed well in all categories. And even a cursory glimpse of this report, it also jumped out to me that 72 out of 14,478 are deemed statistically valid. And then that phrase was repeated in the report that was made to the commission. I don't know. I want to ask the author of the report, did you think that that assertion was going to slip by unquestioned? 2 commissioners caught it. I caught it. It jumps off the page. To me, the repetition of the phrase statistically valid feels like, right? Isn't it? And it feels like a pathetic smokescreen. And what an incompetent answer. We're all adults in this room, and we all know that you are not ready for that answer. Counterintuitive, probability, binary, one-tail, two-tail, quote, regression analysis type deeper analyses. I literally wrote it down after you said it. These are like buzzwords off like the Wikipedia page of the glossary section for like the statistics page.
And if the report isn't particularly meaningful because this isn't a particularly deep study, then neither is the conclusion that the department performed well in all categories. I also want to say that let's even allow that that is statistically valid. Well, the kinds of cases that really count and are the ones that are screaming for attention it's not about being statistically valid. When I'm reading about body-worn camera, I'm thinking about how both officers' cameras fell off their body at the same time when Albert Ramon Dorsey was killed at 24 Hour Fitness. You know, who cares about statistical validity and which 72 you randomly select? I'm so surprised those didn't make it into the study. What's going on?
Sir, Mr. Novick?
Yeah, this is a typical bloodless CYA report. I'll point out that what he said at the beginning, this is based on the consent decree. The consent decree had to do with the fact that the LAPD had a pattern and practice of racially discriminatory policing that it had to correct. So the fact that you can audit 72 cases, the purpose of that audit is to try to see if you're still engaged in racially discriminatory policing, and the facts on the ground are that you are. Accepting the validity of this report, it said that 8% of the cases they looked at, the arrest packages were not up to standard. 8% of 14,000 is a much more serious number than the 6 in the audit. 4% of the body-worn video were not up to the standard. Officers did not turn them on in time, or they both turned them on and off repeatedly. 4% of 14,000 arrests is, accepting the validity of this report, is outrageous. So I'm floored. I looked at the table of contents. Objective 5 is not mentioned in the report. It says on page 11 and 12, you have procedural justice, treating people with dignity and respect, giving individuals a voice during encounters, being neutral in decision-making, conveying trustworthy motives. None of that is in the actual report, not in the pages indicated or anywhere else. So what the fuck are you looking at?
Thank you. The next 3 speakers, please.
Corey Schmidt, Hamid Khan, and Joseph Olon.
Corey Schmidt, for the record. Okay, so just to start off, hearing body cameras falling off, sounds sketch to me. I don't like the sound of that. But I did want to talk, since I'm a very mathematical person with a background in that sort of thing. So from my knowledge of statistics, you only need, for a detailed analysis, about 1,300 or so of a population to have an accurate sample size of the population. But what I do want to bring up is that this test was a binary test, which basically means it was either a true-false. So we're asking them to self-report, I believe, and so I just don't see that that's going to be extremely accurate, because it could be easily said. I don't know that it's detailed enough of an audit to say that it's, I just don't know the accuracy if it's truthful or not. If we're talking about whether they followed procedure or not, they could easily say, yeah, of course I did, or yeah, of course that's what happened. So I want to make sure that there's proper investigations happening, because I don't want people to be wrongfully arrested.
Sir, Mr. Khan.
It's a classic example of linguistic judo and how to speak from both sides of your mouth, and this whole programmatic fallacy. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about statistical accuracy or inaccuracy, but I think, and this is what goes to show the complete ignorance of the commission about how programs are being unleashed and what is at the heart of these programs. So probable cause comes up, reasonable suspicion comes up, but nobody talks about what is now defining policing around from articulable fact to articulable concern. Their own program for the last 12 years, the Suspicious Activity Reporting Program, defines suspicion as observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning, right? So think about it. That what you are thinking of doing something wrong, that has become the governing feature of how people are being stopped as well. So where does that factor into this binary of whether this is right or wrong, even if we were to grant them for a second? Then you look at policing, that how policing has come down to risk assessment tools. where numbers are being assigned. So what happens to the accuracy about reasonable suspicion, or the binary that they're talking about, that, you know, that they're barking at us to? Then we saw the complete failure of the laser program, where even articulable fact, reasonable suspicion, was being manufactured at the instructions of commanders as well. That came out in the IG audit. So when you look at this bullshit document, this is exactly a clear example that how to speak from both sides of their mouth, because more, when you call some shit out, he comes up and he says there are multiple variables that we got to look at, right? And now what happened to all the variables? What happened to all, you know, everything else that is going on? What happened to all the disparate impact? What happened to all the stops that are being done? What happened to the laser program? What happened to when reasonable suspicion is manufactured? What happened to risk assessment tools? What happened to 0 points people going into chronic offender bulletins? If that is the standard of an audit that you are going to accept, then we know exactly where things are going.
Thank you, sir. Sir.
Just want to take a moment to uplift everything that Zach and Hamid and Michael said. The fact that this is being presented as a statistically valid audit is obviously bullshit to everybody in this room. Even if it was statistically valid, when you actually look at the numbers, the discrepancies mean that if you do the math, it's almost 600 in some cases. Arrest reports, if you extrapolate it to the full 14,700, where officers would be turning their body cameras off and on. That's 600 opportunities for an officer to murder somebody and get away with it. I don't think statistic validity is satisfactory even when the numbers are like that. I also want to take a moment, Hamid was talking about this. When you look at something like probable cause, the definition in this audit is a person of ordinary care and prudence would entertain an honest and strong suspicion. This is obviously an incredibly subjective definition. And the purpose of this audit seems to be to take that incredibly subjective definition and give it the veneer of mathematical certainty. This is the same thing that we see with Predpol. It's an attempt to take what is a racist policing tactic, make it sound scientific and accurate, and then to rubber stamp it by saying in over 96 to 100% of cases, we meeting our own standard that we're setting. And just to the people in this room who are not on the commission or who don't work for the LEPD, this is obviously a smokescreen. It's obviously bullshit.
Are there other speakers, or was that it? Madam?
None.
Okay, the recommended action is to approve the report. Is there a motion to that effect? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
It passes 4-0. I'm sorry, sir, please stop shouting out. Thank you very much for the presentation. Chief, we're on to the report of the Chief of Police.
Commissioners, good morning. As is typical, I will report on significant activities this past week. There was no categorical use of force this past week to relay to you. I did attend last week the Terrorism Liaison Officer Symposium. This was a citywide effort of bringing our terrorism liaison, TLOs, from each of the commands together to brief them as to the state of the nature of threats to the city, the safety of the city, the shift as we've seen in the increase in hate crimes, year after year increases that we've seen since 2016, to give information and context about that, how tips and leads may manifest themselves on an area level, the importance of our terrorism liaison officers recognizing those and ensuring that we conduct investigations and also notify major crimes so that we can ensure a comprehensive response. Also had an opportunity to attend the swearing-in ceremony for the Los Angeles World Airport's Chief of Police, Cecil Ramble, welcoming Cecil to the city family. Sheriff Cecil Ramble was previously an undersheriff for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and after his retirement there, became a city manager of the city of Compton, and his bringing now into the city family as Chief of Airport Operations, I believe will help us work in a more unified manner together toward the safety of all of Los Angeles. This past week, I also attended on Friday the Reseda Police Academy Magnet Formal Inspection and Hall of Fame induction. There was 225 young people from the ages of freshman till senior high school students that participated in our police magnet program there. It was encouraging the heart to talk with these young men and women who have such a great future in front of them, and to hear their aspirations and ambitions to become responsible adults. Many of them will not join, I anticipate will not become police officers, but through the training the magnet program provides good discipline, personal responsibilities, what it means to be a contributing member of our society. I think that we have a bright future. This past Saturday, I also attended a community day that was at the Oakwood Recreation Center in the Venice area, and had an opportunity to talk with a number of folks and people who lived in that community, and enjoyed a good Saturday afternoon. Moving over to our crime pictures, we continue to see an overall decrease in violent and property crime, with a 6.7% reduction in Part 1 crime. That's 7,484 fewer Part 1 crimes today than a year ago. And the ulterior decrease, we're at 7.6% overall reduction. Our areas of victims being shot, an area I've focused on each week, we now are in a negative column with 38 fewer individuals shot this year than last. That is a substantial improvement from where we were just months ago, and that's a 7% reduction over a 2-year period. The areas in understanding the nature of that reduction is we are seeing a reduction in gang crime this year to date, with 71 fewer gang-related crimes, and that is encouraging. Yet this weekend, I'm sorry to report, there was a 17-year-old young person that was shot and killed in the Hollenbeck area. That may have some gang ties or some gang influence in that unfortunate death. I want to thank the Hollenbeck community, as well as the men and women who worked over the weekend, and we made actually 2 arrests of the individuals we believe responsible for that tragic murder. As to the number of officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths, there have been no additional in-custody deaths since my last report. In-custody deaths total numbers of 4 this year versus 7 last year, and a 5-year average is 5. So officer-involved shootings, we have a total of 22 officer-involved shootings this year versus 28 last year. That's a 21% reduction. There have been 10 fatal officer-involved shootings this year. That number last year was 11, and our 4-year average is 15. Relating to traffic safety, we continue to see an overall reduction in citywide traffic reports, traffic collisions. However, we see a slight increase in the number of fatals, with 198 individuals, people who've lost their lives this year versus 194 last year. That's a 2% increase. Again, our challenges remain in bicyclists and motorcycle involved traffic collisions. Moving over to our personnel report, we have a total of 10,002 sworn personnel on the payroll, 2,952 civilian personnel that are employed. That's approximately 90 civilians that are understaffed. What we're doing currently as we look at our civilian and sworn staffing is we have slowed some of our promotions and hiring in relationship to our staffing needs as a means of attempting to curtail some additional budget monies. There's a report over the weekend about a current budget shortfall in this current year. The department is going through an exercise that I'll be delivering to the mayor's office today, looking at a 3% modeled reduction, which amounts to well over $50 million. We also, however, have taken independent of that a $10 million exercise, believing that that is a number that is far more realistic, given the needs that would require a $50 million curtailment would be quite dramatic. I will ensure that I provide updates to this commission as our discussions with the mayor's office and our elected officials continue on this issue. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chief, with respect to that last matter on the budget shortfall, you're talking about this fiscal year, the year that started in July?
Yes.
And the reductions, is that for this fiscal year or for the budget year that you're currently preparing a budget for?
No, these efforts for the reduction are for the current year that we're in.
Current fiscal year?
Yes. And as a reminder, next year's budget for the 2020-2021 fiscal year will be before this commission, I believe, in a week or 1 or 2 weeks.
Probably 2 weeks, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
2 weeks.
All right. Other commission questions? Sir, any questions? Seeing none, do we have public comment cards on the chief's report?
We do. We have 8. The first few, Michael Novick, Jonathan Foster, Paula Miner, and Gina Viola.
If you guys don't mind, I didn't fill out a speaker card. I want to speak. I got to head out of here.
Sir, you can fill out a speaker card, but there's an order that we follow here, and Mr. Novick is first, sir.
I was going to say, I'm going to run out of here. It'll take 2 seconds.
Sir, you're out of order. Mr. Novick needs to speak first. Thank you. It was Mr. Novick, Mr. Foster, Ms. Miner, and
Gina Viola.
Thank you. Sir.
Yeah, I'm struck by the fact that the chief discussed his involvement with the police magnet program. I don't know if you're aware, there's been a big controversy about the JROTC programs at LA schools, where although they've been deceptive about it, they're involved in weapons training. I'm curious if there's any weapons handling or weapons training, firing involved with the police magnet program at the schools, which would actually violate the school zero tolerance policy. I see a no, that's good. I'm curious also if the chief has done anything about the officers that were exposed in the effort by, I think it was about 20 media organizations around the state to investigate police officers found guilty of crimes, whether any of them are still working for LAPD who are named in that database, and whether others that the chief is aware of who are not in that database. And just point out about the officer-involved shootings that based on the chief's figures, again, the percentage of people shot by the police who die is higher than it has been in the past. And if there are 10 people killed and there's still a month and a half to go, that the likelihood that the LAPD will hit its long-term annual record of killing somebody every month is still there, not to mention the people who died in custody beyond the ones who were shot. So I think that the chief might be patting himself on the back, but I think that there's a lot of room to deal with these issues that are not being dealt with, and that basically the department and the chief still have a shameful record. So for many months, people came here and said that Charlie Beck must go, and maybe it's time to start saying that Michael Moore must go.
Mr. Foster.
Hi, Jonathan Foster. I guess it's been a kind of a good week, no use of force. So do we ever say anything about the public, though, that they either do shoot people and need the police to come, or maybe they don't then commit crime and the police don't have to come and use of force? I think it has a lot to do with the public. To some extent, I've talked about the different things that the police could do so that they never had to take the gun out. No one's listening. The Pentagon's missing trillions of dollars, and you couldn't even do it if you were going to try to do it. You'd have to ask some billionaire for some money. Special Order 40's got to go. Remember, Jamil Shaw got killed. Jose Espinosa's in jail forever. He could have been deported, still alive, and his mom could see him, and then he could come back. He'd be alive. You got Illuminati Beck in Chicago, but here he never affected the changes that Bratton affected. But his changes, Beck cited that Bratton was from outside the LAPD.
Sir,
that was why he
your
was able
comments
to
the
make those
chief's
changes.
Report, please?
Yeah, this is very important. It's about the chief, isn't it? Yep.
It's about the chief's
yeah,
report.
Well, his report was pretty good, and they did kill a guy on the sidewalk. See, he put more police officers on the sidewalk, but they killed the black man. So when the officer, I watched the video, the officer, he's standing there, the guy reaches for the gun, but he didn't actually get it. He fell back down on the ground. The officer is able to take a step back and then pull the gun. Did not have to pull the gun and shoot the guy. Didn't have to do this. I watched the video. The gun never left the officer. So I'll be watching if Chief Beck, Illuminati Beck, if he's any good in Chicago. I don't believe in him.
Sir, that's not a matter before this commission. Ms. Miner? And then Ms. Viola. Sir, please stop interrupting the meeting, Mr. Foster, or you'll be excused. Ms. Minor.
Paula Minor, BLM. You know, BLM, Black Lives Matter, comes to this commission so that we can be aware of the policies and procedures that impact how LAPD treats our community, especially black folks who are disproportionately targeted and harmed and murdered by LAPD. So while you, Chief Moore, reported on the reduction of fatal officer-involved shootings, we are aware that 2 shootings of minimally threatening black men continue to reverberate throughout our community. And these were the 2 shootings this year that were found out of policy by this commission. These continue to impact and traumatize the families in our community. The murder of Albert Ramon Dorsey, which you're all aware of, in the locker room at the 24-Hour Fitness, has resulted in a year-long boycott of 24-Hour Fitness, where hundreds of their members have signed cancellation notices and signed letters to the CEO in San Ramon. A group of activists visited 24-Hour Fitness in San Ramon as a result of this action. Also, the murder of Grishario Mack, which was found out of policy, has resulted, I guess, in a coalition of community organizations and people who had not necessarily been coming together to speak up about what happens when one person is murdered in a way that is not acceptable. So we continue to demand, Chief Beck, that there be firing of those 3 officers whose shootings were found out of policy. That is Ryan Lee, Martin Robles, and Edward Agadepa. We found out that Edward Agadepa also shot a black man in 2017, almost a year before. This officer, evidently the training didn't take, the de-escalation didn't take. We have a person who has had 2 murders of black men in 2 years.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Viola? And who follows Ms. Viola, please?
Mr. Herman, George Bazzetti, and Adam Smith.
I want to echo Paula Minor's question about Ryan Lee, Martin Robles, and Edward Agadepa. All 3 have been found out of policy, and we've left several messages in your office. Are they still working? Are they active? What are you going to do with officers who are found out of policy? When you first took over, you came to many of these meetings, and your demeanor was very different from your predecessor. You engaged with us. You acted like you were very interested in transparency. You were interested in complying with SB 1421. And it seems now that we have a few bullets out of policy, that's all different. Now you won't speak to that at all. You won't address that at all. You won't answer direct questions about that at all. You won't answer any phone calls, any emails about that at all. So you talk about a murder in the Hollenbeck division with gang ties and gang influence. Any murder down there is going to be deemed that way because by definition of location, they are automatically assumed gang tied and gang influenced. So I don't really understand how you still define those things. Another question I would have is, what about open cases? You never report on that in the chief's report. And I'm curious about what happens with those. One in particular, Harrison Crystal, was a young man who was killed last August, a year ago August, in front of Dorsey High School. LAPD was in pursuit of the person who shot Harrison Crystal and lost him. And that case still hasn't been closed, and that family is tormented. So I just often wonder, you can't prevent crime.
Please stop shouting out. Ms. Viola, you can have another 10 seconds.
It's okay. The shouting out is the only thing that seems to get your attention. While Hamid Khan was speaking,
thank you, ma'am.
4 of you weren't even looking.
Thank you, ma'am.
Madam President, if
Yes.
I might,
Yes,
recognizing that last week, during my public remarks, the room was empty, I want to restate again that in decision regarding Mr. Dorsey's and that officer-involved shooting, I've taken disciplinary action involving both officers. One officer has been directed to a Board of Rights for termination, the other officers exercising their right to a Board of Rights hearing in lieu of this proposed discipline. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Herman, who I believe is not here. Mr. Paccetti? Paccetti, if you're not going to speak? I'm going to speak. All right, please take the podium, sir. And then Mr. Smith, you're next, if you're here. And is there any other speaker?
Yes, Adam Smith, Hamid Khan, and Corey Schmidt.
What's your guys' problem here? This is a criminal police department and police station, right? Now we're going to talk about somebody who isn't a criminal. You brought up Mr. Rambo at LAX. Are you aware that I worked with Mr. Rambo for years, huh? I'm a former invited partner of the Citizens Advisory Board, fools. And you know those Office of Public Safety people you have here, Mr. Moore? Do you know why they're here? Because they came to me and Celeste King IV to wipe out that police agency and give them to you because they asked to be here. You stupid guy. And now guess what's happening, Mr. Moore? All of Illinois knows about all your goddamn criminal action erasing the police commission meeting. Yeah, you're all felons. When you erase a government document, you committed a felony. 3 of you here on this commission were on the 5-5-15 police commission, weren't you? You erased the damn meeting. You people out here listening, you want to get rid of these pigs? You read the Chief Beck letter that you're a partner to, Mr. Moore, saying you can kill anybody you want against a DOJ agreement. You brought up the DOJ agreement. You forgot the 2003 agreement, didn't you? That the judge hasn't let go, fools. 31,000 dead. 3.6 million illegal prosecutions of misdemeanors on your arrest here. Now the whole world fucking knows. And you're in a shitload of trouble. And if you're not, we do live in Nazi fascist America, spelled AMERIKKKA. Because all I'm finding out is how dirty this whole fucking place is.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, then Mr. Khan, and Mr. Schmidt.
Now you're quiet, huh? Because you're going to jail, fools. And I'm making sure.
Please stop interrupting the meeting. Mr. Paccetti, Mr. Paccetti, please stop interrupting the meeting. Mr. Smith, please proceed. Sir, please stop interrupting the meeting. Mr. Smith. Sir, you're excused from the meeting, Mr. Paccetti.
Me?
Well, now you're leaving immediately. Please escort Mr. Paccetti out of the meeting. Thank you, sir. Please leave the meeting. Immediately, sir. You're interrupting the meeting. Sir, the officers can bring that outside to you. Please leave the meeting. You're interrupting the meeting, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Paccetti, please stop interrupting the meeting.
Hey, could you guys ever,
Sir.
the law and erase the audio
Sir.
of the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
We're going to hold you accountable, equal before the law.
Sir.
I just wanted to ask about the follow-up to the dismantlement of the laser program. When you talk about transparency and community policing and you dismantle this program that has had so much harm within the community over the years, that's collected all of this data from FI cards and chronic offender bulletins, all this shit that you haven't responded to the Stop LAPD spying about, like, what has all that looked like. They've sent demand letters that the department has turned into like CPRA requests and then closed them. So it just seems like there's been no real honest assessment of what, one, the laser program has done to Black and brown communities for near a decade, and what you're still doing with the data that was collected during that obviously failed program. And I guess specifically to Dale Bonner and Shane Goldsmith, like, I feel like we should have, where's the public hearing about the laser program? There was one audit in 8 years, and then suddenly it gets dismantled. What happened to all of the info that was collected on the Black and brown communities that were impacted by laser? The families of people that were killed from Operation Laser. And Chief, I just want to lift up that you mentioned the 21% drop in shootings, police officer involved shootings, but you didn't mention the percentage between the number killed from last year. And it just looks like you're shooting less but killing more. So,
Thank you, sir. Mr. Khan.
Before you start my time, there's some confusion about Michael Moore's announcement about the Board of Rights. Can you repeat what you said, because we didn't really hear clearly what was stated at the last meeting?
So, Commissioners, I'll restate again, this last week during my remarks, as I typically make significant events, I announced my decision relative to the outcome of the Dorsey officer-involved shooting. In that shooting, the actions of 2 officers resulted in me initiating disciplinary action, with 1 officer being directed to a Board of Rights for termination, for purposes of termination. The 2nd officer has elected to take a Board of Rights in contrast to the proposed disciplinary action. Because of state law, I'm preempted from discussing further details about the nature of these disciplinary actions because it is a personnel matter at this time.
And it's on the video from last week's meeting. Mr. Khan, if you'd proceed with your public comment, sir.
Okay, so we'll watch the video too. Okay, so I want to follow up on Adam Smith's comment. So here's the timeline. Like, laser gets dismantled in early April of 2019. We send a letter to the Police Commission on June 4th of 2019 to further investigate that. How is that being dismantled? What has been the process? What has been the follow-up? And what is the cleanup? Nothing happening. That gets turned into a public records request. We get a letter from the LAPD. 2 items are addressed. It's a pretty detailed letter, including 12 items. Only 2 items are addressed. We write to LAPD again. Another surprise, public records is opened, and then it's closed again. Then we write another letter, and then we get this very sort of like trickle-down information saying that, well, the FI cards were not used. And that's what we keep on saying, that you got to investigate and have public hearings. But we have their own documentation that is saying that all that information was being used for, that data is being shared department-wide as well. Then we ask them, okay, what about the information through the license plate readers, social networking analysis, and various other things? Well, that is only restricted to JSS and its staff. And then we have documentation through public records that is saying that is being used for research, and there's a broad-based use of this data as well. So the question is that the harm never ended, and the harm will never end. And that's what we keep on demanding, that open this goddamn public records. Be very clear with us. You need to investigate. There has to be a public hearing that has happened. This program was in place for 10 years. This program gutted the community. This program targeted the community. This program was absolutely as if targeted assassination was going on. And I know that's a stretch for this word. But this is exactly what was going on. Where was Keith Bursey in a laser zone? Where was Grishario Mack in a laser zone? Where was Richard Risher in a laser zone? So we've got to have some closure.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Tiefenk, can I ask you to please work with the department to determine the status of that public records request? Mr. Khan has asked about that a number of times. I had believed it was taken care of. If you could just follow up so that we have that information, I appreciate it. Mr. Schmidt, is you here, sir?
Yes, I'm back. I decided it was important enough to postpone the other stuff. So I just want to speak on, because I know that the 24-hour fitness thing has come up. I want to speak to that a little bit, mainly because there's another issue there, is that, you know, we're talking about getting lockers for you guys, and, you know, well, let me tie back a little bit. I'm essentially living out of my car right now. I haven't had you know, this is for Ram from the Wilshire area, and I got rammed at 24-hour fitness. I'm basically living out of my car, and I got conned out of the stuff in my locker and out of basically my membership to 24-hour fitness. I haven't had a shower since Tuesday. And I have a very powerful enemy at the moment, and he knows that the gym is key to my survival here. He's trying to kick me out of the city. And I had a kid wearing a UCLA jersey and a girl working there wearing red and black. Pretty much conned me out of my stuff and conned me out of my membership. And so I mean, I don't know if you see my appearance, I look like crap, you know, and I just... Most important to me, if you notice, my hat's gone. The guy got my hat. It's symbolic. So I wanted that on the record, I guess, is what I just wanted to speak to it, because it's been bugging me. I don't know what to do at the moment. So to finalize my thoughts, hearing about the PCRA stuff, the public record stuff, we, you know, be more open. I think that needs to happen. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Public comment period. Madam Secretary, are there public comment cards
Yes.
for general public?
We have the Reverend who submitted a card late on the last matter, Michael Novak, and Jonathan Foster.
Please add the Reverend to public comment. And the first three speakers for general public comment are Mr. Novak, Mr. Foster, and
Gina Viola.
Ms. Viola. Thank you. Mr. Novak.
Yeah, in addition to reiterating, as I always do, that you should be meeting out in the community in the evening so people can attend, I want to point out the absurdity that the chief made his remarks to the public at a meeting that the public was no longer at because you chased everybody out. I want to go back to the arrest, booking, and charging audit and just demonstrate to you why people have no respect for you as a body. I pointed out to you that in the table of contents of this report, it has objective number 5 of the audit. Objective number 5 of the audit is procedural justice, treating people with dignity and respect, giving individuals a voice during encounters, being neutral in decision-making, conveying trustworthy motives. That's the areas that speak to the fact this came from the consent decree about racially prejudiced policing by the LAPD. That's supposed to be on page 12. If you look at page 12, what it says, this section intentionally left blank. There's no reference to procedural justice in the report, and yet you proceeded to accept this report. I would urge any of you with an ounce of self-respect who voted in the majority, which is to say all of you, because you always vote unanimously, to move for reconsideration of this report and demand to know what happened to procedural justice in the audit of procedural justice in the auditing, booking, and charging. And this is symptomatic of the fact that you're looking at a little slice of reality. You're not really looking at the stops. You're not looking at the consequences. You're not looking at what happens after people are booked and how many people die in custody. You're not looking at Waukesha Wilson, who suicided herself, and then they blanked out the video and they denied the fact that they had to fire somebody in her case and kept that from the police commission, and then you proceeded to find her death not out of policy. So you're completely failing in whatever you think your task is, even in its own terms. And you have to wake up and smell the roses.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Foster.
Jonathan Foster, I have some comments that'll probably get me some people upset, but I did have to start with this. Have you noticed that when a person's speech in this room gets right to the root of the corruption, someone states, off topic, and how fast she cuts everybody off is very mean. And Johnson never did this, and Soboroff never did this. I think you need your brain checked. Now, I don't say yes sir, and no sir because I'm white to the police department. with trace amounts of Choctaw blood. I say yes, sir, no, sir, so I don't get shot dead. I've noticed that much of the principles that these people like to see, if all these shootings and murders by the LAPD planting cocaine on black pullovers and the other likenesses of all this stuff that people are very upset about, legitimately upset about, if you get your way, it seems to support what white wants. There are crazy white people. I've been around them. But white people, most people, want to see everything you scream about end. And I have found that all types of color, language, every nationality in its greater percentages want what you scream about to stop also. Most all people don't want to see drugs around, gang violence, car crime, burglaries, murder, domestic violence, and it goes on. And especially the LAPD murdering unarmed black people. It's not just white. Every color wants this to stop. This happens in every country, though, that is not white. And these problems exist way worse in many other countries. But let's just examine Mexico a little bit. The vigilantes there, they were about to destroy the drug cartel. But the Mexican government, run by the white people, stepped in, and so the drug cartel continues. We got a problem. If Mossad is running the drug cartel, we can't get rid. The Mexicans were about to get rid of the drug cartel.
Ms. Viola, and who are the next three speakers after Ms. Viola?
Zach Sherwin, Jeffrey Delshad, and Adam Smith.
Let's talk about PredPol. One of your commissioners can't even sit and listen to it. It's based on pseudoscience. Jeff Brantingham, the creator of PredPol, has been discredited by his peers at UCLA. 68 UCLA students and faculty sent a letter to the LAPD commissioner on April 2nd, denouncing the research for its ethical implications and because it naturalizes policies and practices that disparately impact Black, brown, and poor communities. A recent LA Times article by Mark Puente shared the stories of police departments around the country abandoning PredPol because of its ineffectiveness. PredPol CEO Brian McDonald is even quoted saying PredPol isn't meant to reduce crime. Yet, Commissioner Eileen Decker on October 14th forcefully removed the community from the police commission meeting to not hear our comments on PredPol. You refuse to hear the authority and command the community has over the impact of predictive policing and PredPol. The Police Commission is well aware of the work that the community had in exposing the impact of Operation Laser, but the Commission refuses to hear how the community has exposed the failing of PredPol because they are economically and politically invested in its success. Even one of your own commissioners here on this board is invested in that success. Mayor Garcetti in his 2018 State of the City address glorified predictive policing. We demand that this commission annul the October 15th vote and reschedule and agendize public hearing of the item with immediate effect on the forthcoming police commission meeting. In addition, when are you going to have a meeting out in the community? Every single meeting for 2019 has been in this room on a Tuesday morning at 9:30. You have yet to hold a single meeting out in the community where people can actually attend and give you feedback. There are people that go to great lengths to be here every week and only seem to be heard when they make outbursts in the room, not when they're at the podium.
Mr. Sherwin?
I want to echo the previous speaker's calls for these meetings not to happen here at this time. It's just, the point should be abundantly clear by now, and the four of you have the power to change it. So do something about it. It's absurd that it's gone on this long. Commissioner Decker, I don't know the micro dynamics going on inside your decision-making process last week to eject one of our community members with no warnings after he referred to your actions as racist, whereas by contrast, the gentleman who was ejected before was hollering at you multiple times, and you gave him, you told him again and again to stop interrupting or he'd be asked to leave the meeting. So again, I can't speak to the internal decision-making process you made, but as a community member, it's not a good look, as they say. For the commission as a whole, and I think, again, especially you, it's been at least 6 weeks, if not more, since there was a moment at one of these meetings where Steve Soberoff mouthed asshole at a community member. And then when called upon to speak to that moment, doubled down on it, and into his microphone repeated that he thought the community member was an asshole, clearly without any shame or a sense that he is a person up at this dais and the power imbalance, the responsibility for decorum in this room rests squarely on his shoulders. That is not something I will soon forget. I've never seen such a thing. Do something about that, like make a comment after I'm done speaking, at the very least, saying that that's not something that your board stands by and is going to tacitly accept and tolerate. At the least, I mean, I think a formal apology of some kind, I don't expect it, but I do think that it's what's called for in this circumstance. And yeah, that's just unbelievable behavior. It's so trust destroying to come in here and just see thing after thing happen that just defies common sense and the basic ways that humans relate to each other. It's really an education for me.
Mr. Sherwin, just one moment, if you wouldn't mind, sir. I realize in that meeting that you're referencing that there was a lot of commotion. You may not have heard, but I did apologize on behalf of the board. That shouldn't happen at board meetings. I agree with you. And if you did not hear that apology, I do apologize. It should not happen at a board meeting. So thank you, sir.
I didn't hear it that day.
Sir, please, you'll be called up to, sir, your name is down on public comment. You'll have an opportunity. Mr. Sherwin, Mr. Jeffrey Deshad, you're next, sir. And then Mr. Smith.
I'm pretty sure no one on
Sir,
the
please
board
don't call out
has
during the meetings.
been arrested themselves by LAPD, I assume. So as someone who has been, it's not that pleasant an experience necessarily. I wasn't really physically abused or beaten up or anything, although I know that does sometimes happen, or I believe that sometimes happens. However, when you're taking people into custody, you're asking the community to trust you that you can be responsible for those people and their life and their health and everything else. In the case of Waukesha Wilson, who Michael brought up, I don't think that you are in a position to ask the community to trust you to arrest people or to enforce the law when you take people into jail and they don't come out. I read the report that Beck made regarding that whole thing. That's pretty disgusting. I don't know all the political dynamics of how things work in the city and in the universe, but I didn't find the report to be truthful. It didn't make me feel comfortable that this organization can be a force for positive things in Los Angeles. I don't know what he's doing now or how the relationship is with this board, but I think that something's wrong.
Mr. Smith? And after Mr. Smith, who is speaking?
Patricia Mendoza, Virginia Ceballos, and Hamid Khan.
Again, want to bring up a letter that was sent by the Stop LAPD Spying. Gina alluded to it. That hasn't been responded to about annulling that vote on the 22nd. It seems that despite a community member's assertion earlier that you're taking a page out of the Soberoff presidential playbook by shutting down meetings in order to continue voting on very consequential things like Predpol. Commissioner Goldsmith, I know that you're on Twitter, although you have a protected account, so we can't really communicate. But a couple weeks ago, I was on vacation in Massachusetts, And I spent 5 or so hours of my day listening to this meeting online to hear what my buddy Mike, my other Twitter buddy, was talking about the Breitbart ads. And I don't say this to, brag about my prolific Twitter use, but it dawned on me while I'm in Massachusetts, like texting Zach and saying, if you go up there, can you say this? There's no outlet for that in this room. You guys pretend to be transparent. Gina talked about us, you not having a public meeting this year when Steve said that there's supposed to be 6 a year or whatever. The fact that I can write from my house, and by house I mean apartment, a comment that will be on the record at city council and any council committee hearings, but you can't do that at the fucking police commission, that's abhorrent. How come we can't do that?
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, was the next speaker Ms. Mendoza?
Yes, Patricia Mendoza.
Good morning to the public, to all commissioners and chief and president and all of you. My name is Patricia Mendoza. I was born on Temple and Beaudry, so I've been there for 55 years. And I worked in the law office since 1983, and I've done a lot of investigations. Today I'm here regarding my neighbor that owns a beauty salon for 33 years on Temple between Edgewater and Beaudry. Her biggest mistake is that she let one person that owns a flower shop to sublease, and she only has one helper, but she's only the only one in the contract. And today I'm here to see if maybe the chief police and all of you can help me if there's a crime involved of what they did to my friend. They evicted her, and everything that I've investigated, it's all false information. The landlord did not evicted her or the manager. And one of my last addresses that I investigated late last night in Long Beach, it's a UPS. Everything, all the addresses in this lawsuit, it's an open shopping mall. So this is the last address that I investigated last night. It's in Long Beach. It's a UPS service. It's a P.O. box. It's a group of office claiming they're law offices or attorneys, but they're not. It's a group of sheriffs group of people that do work for sheriffs. So I think there's something really, really not good involved in this, where there's innocent people being evicted from their homes and their businesses. In this lawsuit, they put residential, it's a commercial. And I would like to know, she's 62 years old. She's been a good tenant. And if we can somehow help her with the police report, a crime for elderly abuse, they evicted her, the sheriffs came, and all her stuff has been removed, and we don't know where they're at. These people have no respect for the law. They think they're above the law, the police, and the judges. And there's been a lot of verbal abuse, and there's been a lot of...
Thank you, ma'am.
So-
Chief, is there someone?
Right. So Lieutenant Rafish, if you would meet this woman here in the back there, and we'll begin an investigation. Thank you.
Thank
If you'll see right back there at the door, the
she's
officer.
Virginia Ceballos, so she can have her 2 minutes.
Oh, is she the next speaker?
Yes,
Oh, please, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you speak for me, because I speak too much English?
How do we usually work this, Mr. Tifang, if there's a language barrier?
If she wants to translate, we can. What we usually would do is put 4 minutes on the clock, so the translation would give her the full 2 minutes.
So, ma'am, can
Yes,
you
I can
speak and then you translate, okay? That's how we have to do it procedurally. And if you could put 4 minutes on the clock? Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and interpret what you guys just said. Te van a dar 4 minutos para hablar, te voy a interpretar, y es importante que hables y te expreses, que es tu derecho.
Sí. Buenos días,
Good morning,
everybody.
everyone.
Por favor, ayúdenme. Ahorita ya no sé yo qué hacer, porque me sacaron todas mis cosas del salón y no me dejan entrar tampoco. Y ya no tengo nada para trabajar. Yo ya soy grande de edad y ya no me dan trabajo en ningún lado.
I'm here today to ask you for help. If you guys can please help me, because I don't know what to do. Basically, it's like I need to go back and work, and I don't know where to ask for help. I ask you please to help, because I am an older person and I need help.
Y pues necesito trabajar para tener dinero para pagar mi renta y mi comida, porque me fui al Seguro Social, pero es muy poquito lo que me dan y no sé yo qué hacer ya. Por favor, ayúdenme.
I need to work and bring some income. I did go to SSI to apply, but it's not enough money for me to survive. Please help me.
Porque estas personas me dijeron muchas cosas en el trabajo y de ahí ya no me dejaron entrar.
These people at work told me a lot of things, and they no longer let me enter my own business.
Y yo soy diabética y pues necesito ir a trabajar.
I am diabetic and I need to work.
Muchas gracias. Es todo.
¿Tienes más minutos?
¿Qué les puedo decir?
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Por favor, ayúdenme. No, yo no sé qué hacer. Yo no sé qué hacer, la verdad. Y pues necesito trabajar, ¿verdad? Y pues ya soy mayor de edad, ya. No me dan trabajo en ningún lado.
I really, really need your help, please. I am an older person. I need to work, and there's nobody else that will offer me a job because I guess she means her age.
Solo mi amiga me está ayudando, ella, en todo esto, pero no sé.
Only my friend is helping me, which she means me. I also would like to share, with all due respect, I thank you all for listening, the public, Chief Police, President, and everyone. John Ray does not exist. So I'm guessing, with all due respect, that John Ray might be someone fake, and I wouldn't be surprised that the helper of her tenant went and go get a fake ID and ID. And when I go to San Clemente, he puts an office address. I wouldn't be surprised if someone involved with with the county police department. So at the end of the day, it is a scam what they did to her. And in this lawsuit, there is only one signature of a judge. She's the presiding judge. The date is dated October 16 of 2017. So everything what I've seen here, dates, signatures, addresses, I already investigated. It's all open shopping mall. No one has ever existed with those addresses. So it is a scam, and we are going to go to the county to report this to also the board commissioners to see if we can get help. She does understand that she has to hire an attorney to see if she can do an emergency appeal, which I hope we don't have a deadline of 30 days. Thank you today, all of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's really important if you'll see that man right there with a tie on, Leon,
I will,
he'll
sir.
talk to you. And
Thank you.
for us to initiate an investigation, you should talk with him today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
We'll be back next month.
Our next speakers are Mr. Khan and who else?
Jennifer Young, William Young, and Reverend.
Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan, then Jennifer Young, William Young, and then Reverend.
I just want to bring back something that was mentioned by Gina and Adam as well. That we sent a letter to the commission on October 22nd, and it's been 3 weeks that we haven't heard back. And this is regards to the absolutely shameful act of betrayal of the community, which you led, Eileen Decker, on October 15th. And what was even more shameful was that as a body that is supposed to represent the public's best interest, they willfully ignored a letter signed by over 450 academics, completely discrediting the merits and ethics of the research. They willfully ignored the exposure of a sitting commissioner, Sandra Figueroa Villa, who accepted a $7,500 bribe from Predpol in 2014 when this corporation was looking to expand in all 21 divisions. They willfully ignored the expose of what the LAPD cited as the success of Predpol, showing 7.4% drop in crime. And that report, by the way, out of the 7 authors, 5 of them are stockholders of Predpol, and 2 of them co-own the company itself. And then, at very ease, they violently removed the community because going back to which my comrade Courtney Eccles, who's finishing her PhD in criminology, talks about the black codes, that one of the crime was to speak loudly to a black woman. And that's exactly what Akili was doing, and she absolutely couldn't handle that, right? So now where we are is this complete sort of like claiming this thing that, well, we followed the procedure, we followed the decorum, and Zach just called out the decorum of this board itself. The decorum that takes bribes, the decorum that calls people's assholes while you're sitting on the podium, and completely and willfully reject the community as well. So next week, they're having public hearings on community policing, and we will be presenting. Just remember that this piece, this shock absorber for the system, this body
Thank you, sir.
is an integral part of community policing. That's why that's
Thank
a
you,
fraud.
sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Khan, as I said previously, but I'll repeat today, it was with great distress, frankly, that meeting was closed. There were many disruptions. I asked repeatedly for there not to be, but we will continue to review the Pred poll issue. We will continue, sir. We will continue. We're not going to undo that vote. There was disruptions at the meeting, but we will continue to review that issue, sir. And I look forward to your continued input, but within the structure of this body, sir. We have a number of other speakers today, sir. Jennifer Young and then William Young. Ma'am, are you Ms. Jennifer Young?
Yes, my name
And are
is
you Mr. William Young?
Yes, I am. Yes. Excuse us before we start. Mr. Young also would like to speak one, but he gets very emotional, very upset.
Okay.
Shall we just...
Understood. Why don't you just begin? And who's going to speak first? Ms. Young, you're up first. You have 2 minutes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. And Mr. Young would like me to...
Can you start the clock, please? Thank you.
Mr. Young would like to speak for him on his behalf. And first of all, good morning, Mr. President. Thank you very much for your kindness. Last time you took care of us when we came up. Thank you very much for that. This is our third or fourth time to come here, Mr. Moore, regarding one same issue, the stolen vehicle report, which was never stolen. That was the vehicle. We paid for a perpetrator we didn't know, but Simon Saradin, the former general manager of Van Nuys Mercedes, he has been friends with that perpetrator for 15 years and more. Simon Saradin gave the vehicle to the perpetrator. That's why the perpetrator had the access to sell the vehicle, $90,000 Mercedes SUV to us. How could we know that? That's how we were damaged by Simon Saradin through their conspiracy. And we got the vehicle January 2016. We had the vehicle in our possession over 1.5 years. And one day, CHP officer came, 4-5 police cars came into our warehouse and confiscated the vehicle. And based on the fraudulent stolen vehicle report, the vehicle was never stolen. And 2 months before that, we went to Simon Saradin. We told him we had the vehicle. Let's talk about it. But he didn't see us. He let the secretary talk to us. When we left the dealership, and Simon Saradin called us, are you Jennifer Young? Are you William Young?
Ma'am, now it's Mr. Young's turn to speak.
I'm gonna have
We don't do that here, sir, under the rules adopted by this commission. Only each individual is allowed to speak. Chief, I understand there was somebody, I recall this couple being here previously.
Yes.
There was somebody assisting them. Perhaps we can engage that.
Well, Madam President, I will say that we have investigated this matter, as has the Office of Inspector General. And as for a matter of the department, there's no further action that we can take. And I know that you feel that you have been wronged.
Because your detective
Okay.
lied
Excuse me, ma'am,
to...
please don't interrupt at this point. Sir, Chief, were you done?
So I'm sorry for your loss. However, at this point, there is no further action the department can do. This is matters.
So, ma'am,
Thank you.
procedurally, what can happen is Mr. Young can speak if he chooses. He has 2 minutes to begin. Sir, if you want to address.
You're telling me the theft of a
Start the
vehicle is
clock.
permissible in this city. That's what I understand.
And
Which the main used the police department to steal my vehicle, and you're saying it's okay. That's what I'm hearing.
Do you protect rich
Ms.,
people?
It's Mr. Young's turn to speak. You can use your time if you choose, sir.
Let's just forget it. They're not willing to listen. Let's go.
Let me sign another card. I want to have another one.
Ma'am, this is the end of public comment today. The next speaker, Reverend, if you choose to speak, sir.
I have the documents here, Mr.
You can give it to one of these individuals here, but please don't interfere with other people speaking at this point. Thank you, ma'am.
Shit.
Mr. Tiefeng, can you have someone take whatever documents they wanted to?
Yeah, and do nothing with it. Yesterday was Veterans Day. And I'm a U.S. Army veteran. And like most veterans, Veterans Day, we reflect. And yesterday, I was literally talking about my battle buddies who died in the war on terror. And I was telling one of their friends, I hope to God that they died for something. And the next day, on the 12th, my First Amendment right was violated. I really wonder what y'all reflect on during Veterans Day. I really want to know. Because for that piece of shit executive assistant not to include me into the earlier public comment, and for you, Linda Fairstein, to only give me one opportunity, and she said I was late. Let me tell you what I was not late to. I wasn't late to signing up to fight for this piece of shit country. I wasn't late to watching bodies after dead bodies who were 19 and 20 and 21 years old, didn't even live not even a fourth of their lives, die for you to sit up here and violate people's rights. I mean, Veterans Day was yesterday. And you practice this bullshit. And second of all, if Albert Ramon Dorsey's officers be considered for firing, Grishario Mack's officers should be considered for firing because you all ruled the shootings out of policy. What kind of reverence for law is that?
Thank you, sir.
No fucking thank you.
Yes, sir, your time is up.
When are you going to uphold the fucking Constitution?
Thank you,
When
sir.
are you going to fucking uphold the Constitution?
Thank you,
When
sir.
are you going to fucking uphold the Constitution?
Sir, please have a
When are
seat.
you going to fucking uphold
Are there any public comments for the closed session items?
Yes, we have Michael Novick and Adam Smith.
Sir, we have two public comments on the next item on the agenda. Sir, are you going to sit down or I'm going to have to ask you to leave? Sir, are you going to sit down? All right, very well. Sir, you're excused from today's meeting so that we can hear public comment. Sir, you're excused from today's meeting. Are you going to leave, sir? Given that the gentleman will not voluntarily leave the meeting, we will now recess and go into closed session without the benefit of hearing public comment. Thank you.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item 4A1 in accordance to Government Code 54957.
quick check to see if no one in the public is outside that wants to come in. There's no one in the lobby. Nobody out there, okay.
The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 4A1 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.